Welcome to the current backloggers. I'll be honest with you, this is incredibly awkward, and I have a newfound appreciation for Casey. Um, I had no idea how to start this. I was considering stealing his entire format and going that route, but I honestly feel it was very disingenuous and really cringy. So I decided just to hop in here. I have a lot of experience listening to Bill Burr, so maybe some of that solo podcasting will wear off on me. I was considering going back and listening to the older episodes and trying to figure out exactly how he lines this up here. But essentially, I think I'm going to go my own route here and maybe start out with what we were watching is what we have watched this week, which is how I think Casey starts it that way. But one of the big things I watched this week was the VR showcase. I was a little late to it, and I think Casey was as well. But honestly, I don't think there was a lot of people watching this. The channel, which is I guess kind of seen as the hub for VR, is at I think 47,000 subs last time I checked, which is insane to think that that's considered the top channel or the main place for VR. It wasn't the greatest thing in the world either. I wasn't a big fan of the accents, and I know initially it started out. The music they were playing reminded me of SpongeBob music or the DVD menus. I guess I'll just go down the line of games they announced doing that. So it looks like Solaris was the first game they announced, which I don't know, just looked like your normal FPS or your Halo. I wasn't too keen on it. It looks like some stuff we've seen for like the last 20 years. It was a sneaky, almost like a sneaky combat game. One of the big things that stood out to me was no PSVR, which I don't understand how you could release a VR game and not have it on one of the biggest platforms for VR games. The next game they announced was Onward, which looked like Arma, in VR, and I think even the guy that had made the game, was a single guy, had even mentioned that he based it a lot off of Arma. It is on Oculus Home and Steam VR and Quest. Once again, no PSVR. I don't know if that has to do with the power of the PSVR, if it's not strong enough to run these games, or what the issue is, but it would make sense that you would want these games on your PSVR. But then the next game they announced was Wraith: The Oblivion Afterlife, which it's another horror VR game, which I think is perfect for VR. I think that environment, at least for me anyways, I already hate scary VR games, or scary games in general, being in control of somebody and the character that's powerless and being chased by someone, especially, and then you take that same concept and putting it in VR is absolutely horrifying for me. Which it looks like it's part of the Vampire the Masquerade, which I guess were big in the 90s, which is why when they started announcing all this stuff in this series, I'd never heard of them. It looks like it was a tabletop. They had PC games. I think even at one point they had a TV show, Wikipedia said. And it looks like you're playing as a ghost, which it doesn't make much sense to me. I guess it's kind of cool in the mechanic sense of things, but you're a ghost. How could you, you can't die. How do you expect me to be, scared if, I'm a ghost? Then the next game they announced was you have your Phantom Covert Ops, which is possibly the most generic name I've ever heard for a video game. Sounds like a mid-2006 budget title for the 360. But I do like the Soviet vibes it was giving off. But if you go watch the trailer, it seems like you're in a boat. You're constantly in a boat, which is a cool aspect because I think a big issue for VR is the walking mechanics. But if you put the character in a boat, this is a little kayak. I think it kind of defeats a lot of the, or gets rid of a lot of the issues of. It almost seems like walking in VR games are almost difficult to make, or it takes the player out of it. So I think putting it on a boat made sense. It's just really odd. But yeah. I think the next game they announced then was Star Shaman, which I don't know. One of the things I did not like about this was it seems that the developer was more focused on themselves than the game. If you go and watch their announcement for this thing, it's like a lot of hipsters in their office. It's almost like fake business meetings, like standing behind each other, pointing at the screen and talking. And I didn't like it. And I think at one point, too, the one lady, the PR lady, mispronounces the name of the game. I think she calls it Star Shaman. Once again, no PSVR and their awkward B-roll. Totally. I have no plans of playing this game. Now, the next game was Walking Dead Sin and Sinners, a VR Meat Grinder update, which I did not know. I'd heard this game was released. I didn't know it was purely a VR game, which kind of makes sense because I feel like it died on the vine, but the fact that it's a VR game is why I didn't hear any more about it. It's a Skydance Interactive, which I know them for making movies, but I didn't know they were making video games. This seems to be only their second game. I think their first game was like a big robots battling game. But, yeah, I mean, it looks cool. I like it, but I didn't see any guns, which is kind of odd for a Walking Dead game. It looked like bow and arrows and spears. And there was these point bubbles that popped up that were, telling you like, oh, you got 200 points or something like that. But it was blocking the player's view. Like you couldn't see more zombies coming at you because it was telling you how many points you got. And I felt like the point system was kind of taking me out of that eerie, weird, scary environment. Because it's just like this pop-up, and I think it played some music. It just seemed like an odd thing that if I had the game, I'd hope that some way you could turn that off. But it did seem reminiscent of the old arcade games with Sega, House of the Dead, the way it looked and felt, and it's the Walking Dead universe. So if I had a VR system that could run it, that's definitely one I would like to pick up. It's super and crazy gory. I was looking at even the game, just not the DLC, just the game in general. Looked amazing, just bashing heads in and just way over the top. This looks like the first game was called Archangel, which just kind of looked like big ass robots fighting each other. So, and then I think the next one would have been Traffic Jams, which is looked pretty cool, and it actually was working on everything, including mobile devices. Well, it worked on all the VR devices, and then people could join in on their mobile devices. And essentially what it was, you were directing traffic in VR, but then there's like, monsters and zombies added in there. And it just seemed like a good party game. I think an issue with VR, especially if you're playing at a party or, with people in real life, they're kind of removed from that, and it's just you. But I think with them including the cell phone aspect of it is a way to be able to play VR with a group of people over. The next game, I can't even pronounce this, man. Opersinia, I think it was. It's like a dungeon crawler. It looked like a classic. Like you look up some of the old footage of, or who knows, you might even play them, of the Elder Scrolls games. That's kind of the vibe it was given off to me. I think that's coming out on everything, even PSVR, which is, it's kind of weird you have to say that. The next game they announced was the one that probably stuck out the most to me. And if I had a VR unit, because this is not coming to PSVR, but if I had a VR unit, that this is definitely something to pick up. It's called Area Man Lives. Essentially, you're a radio show host. I recommend to go watch the trailer. There's no way I could describe this. And you're just a disc jockey sitting there running the phone lines and talking to people. And it looks like it's going to be almost like a mystery. And maybe people call in, you could help them through stuff, or I don't know. We'll see. I don't. And then I think the next one was it's like Ion Neon Ninjas. It's like a Neon Ninja shooting game. I mean, it's got the neon look to it. Shit blowing up. I don't think you need me to describe that anymore. Once again, no PSVR though. I don't know if people are waiting for the PSVR 2 to be announced or what's happening, why it's so much lacking towards the support of it. And let's see here. I'm trying to go through this list here. I'm not trying to go down every game, but just stuff that stuck out to me. And then Ghost Portal VR. That's probably my number 2 games. Like, if I had to rank these games, number 1 would be Area Man Lives, and then number 2 for me is Ghost Portal VR. It kind of looked like a complete knockoff of Luigi's Mansion, but that's fine for me. I think that's a perfect example. And this is the only game that I saw on there that's exclusive to VR arcades. So it's a place that you have to actually drive to and, put on the packs, which is, I think, the perfect way to play VR right now. So I don't know if that's going to be in like AMC's thing or there's specific VR arcades around the United States you have to go to. But that's the only arcade game that I saw announced. But I think VR arcades are definitely the future. And if you think of the history of overall video games when they first came out, the place to play video games was the arcades. At least if you wanted to play them in any sort of, power. I hate to say powerful, but the hardware, like you couldn't afford the hardware, and the fact having individual arcades in your home was impossible, which is kind of how VR is currently in its life cycle. So I think arcades right now is probably the best way to play VR, and I hope that more games get announced, exclusively to the arcades, because it almost seems like the home environment is almost limits the VR, especially the walking aspect with VR at your house. Like you can't walk around, but with the VR arcades, you actually walk around, and there's places to like physical things in real life that you can interact with that you couldn't get at home. The number 3 for me then would probably be, I think it's called In Death's Unchained. And essentially it's like a medieval Templar kind of vibe mixed with Doom. They're doing a remaster for the Oculus Quest. I guess this is a game that was already out. And it looks like it's on PSVR, so that's probably how I'll eventually play it. And it's almost like a Dark Souls. I heard people referring it to the Dark Souls for VR. And it just looked awesome. The shooting mechanics and the way they've dealt with traversing the map felt perfect for the VR. And it's kind of weird to me that you see such. I think that's the end of the. I think that's how they ended the press conference. It's kind of weird to me that you have all this investment into VR, but then the biggest environment for VR, which is your PSVR, has no support. So I'm a little unsure where the money's coming for these games, because if no one's buying them, who's supporting them? And how does a company survive off just selling a few thousand copies? And I hope VR takes off with the Quest and PSVR 2 and arcades and all that stuff. But I'm kind of afraid that we could be seeing, in the early stages of VR dying out. All right. So then, that's that press conference. And then I think current backloggers along the way, at least for me, anyways, has kind of lost its meaning because the way I had initially felt the show was going to go was Casey and I, especially myself, have a lot of media, like so your DVDs and your TV shows, movies, and video games on our backlog that we're supposed to get through. That's the purpose of current backloggers, for us each week to play some of these games or watch some of these movies so we can talk about them. But essentially, it feels like I'm buying more than what I'm watching or playing, and it's definitely something I've got to slow down and be better about, and actually start getting through this stuff. So this week, I've done that. I watched Roseanne. I've gotten through about a season this week of Roseanne. Just rewatching that whole thing, just trying to get through that box set and then move on to the next TV show. Then, of course, each week we watch, Casey and I watch episodes of Lost. Two great shows. Roseanne's a far superior show, though, of course. And then a movie I watched. I have a lot of terrible, I guess you'd call it maybe B horror. I'd even say it's like Z horror. It's just absolutely horrendous. I have a massive collection of that stuff that just corny that I'm trying to get through. This week I watched City of the Living Dead. Lucio Fulci, I think is how you say his name. He's an incredibly famous director of Italian horror films. It's on Amazon Prime. I'm more of a physical media guy, so I have it on DVD. But so if you want to check it out, it's on Amazon Prime. It's got an amazing soundtrack, which is easily my favorite part of this. It's by a gentleman named Fabio Frizzi. That's a super Italian name. But he's famous for his horror soundtracks. I think between the soundtrack and the cinematography, it's amazing. It's almost like a hour and a half long music video for me anyways. It's a heavy in synths and really strung out electric guitars, almost like a Pink Floyd. If you like a good synth soundtrack, like your Carpenter or something like that, I definitely recommend checking it out. And the practical effects were also amazing. Between fog and neon and Corvettes, it was incredibly 80s. And I think it was filmed in 1979 and released in 1980, so this is definitely ahead of its time. My biggest issue with it, which probably would come on the editing floor, because the cutting floor, sorry. It's just confusing. It's just a confusing ass story. I don't know how else to describe it to you. It jumps around constantly to random characters, and it makes you feel like I should know these people. And I'm constantly rewinding, like, wait, did they introduce this guy before? So between that and the terrible acting and writing, it's definitely an 80s movie. And essentially, it's just about a priest that committed suicide, and by committing suicide, he opened up a portal to hell. And this is part of a trilogy. This is the first one in the trilogy. But there's a scene, which I would love to figure out how they filmed this, where they filled an entire room with maggots, and it almost looks like they individually glued maybe mealworms or something like that on the actors. And then the guy gets a drill press through the head. So if you like practical effects and fog and neon Corvettes and synths, I strongly recommend you watch this. Do not watch it thinking you're going to be watching a horror movie. Let's see. I watched another documentary. It's fantastic. It's called Beauty is Embarrassing. It's about a gentleman named Wayne White. He was the mind behind Pee Wee Herman's Playhouse, Pee Wee's Playhouse, and Beekman's World. He's famous for puppets and set designs. And if you look at some of the stuff he's worked on, he's done a bunch of kids shows, and they're almost very stylized the same. He almost, I don't want to say midlife crisis, or he went a little nutty and left the Hollywood world, but it almost seems like he removed himself from Hollywood, and I guess I just really fell in love with him just because of he has a super libertarian views on life, and he's married to Mimi Pond, she's also a successful artist and had worked on The Simpsons and releases some successful books. So it's about them as artists trying to find their way in life and juggle life, and him trying to figure out if he wants to remove himself from society almost and go out to the wilderness with his high school friend. So I think that one's also on Amazon Prime, so I definitely recommend checking that one out. Then we'll move on to what we've been playing. I guess more what I've been playing since Casey's recording his own thing this week. We played Anthem, which I'm still trying to understand how that game had gotten so much shit. Because so far, I don't know if maybe I'm playing such a later version of it and the issues have been patched out. But it has amazing cutscenes, beautiful cutscenes. Essentially, it's knights mixed with sci-fi. So it kind of goes back to that Templar vibe. These massive beasts crashing into a wall and robots fighting. I just don't get how you couldn't like it. I could see where maybe the missions get a little repetitive. It's kind of the same shit over and over again, like go collect this, go shoot this. But the story seems great so far, and I'm really liking it. It almost reminds me of, story-wise, of the first Witcher. Another game I've been playing with Casey is Sunset Overdrive. I'm about halfway through with some side missions still left, which I think that puts me at about maybe 8 hours or so in the game. It's an amazing game. I think Sunset Overdrive was the Crackdown that we wanted and had done a much better job than Crackdown 3 did. Something that really I disliked with Crackdown was when you're climbing up something and you fall off and you have to start from the beginning. But this game had fixed that by when you fall through this warp zone and you pop back out maybe about halfway up the tower instead of starting all the way from the beginning. Just quality of life things that Crackdown, I think, failed, and this game that came out before Crackdown 3 had succeeded at. It's almost Crackdown mixed with Dead Rising, which are both two amazing Xbox exclusives. And just how the game doesn't take itself serious. Casey's mentioned that a bunch, how one of the quotes is like, this guy's trying to explain to you why he needs this item, and then halfway through this long explanation, this stereotypical video game explanation, he's just like, science and blah, blah, blah bullshit, which is an exact quote from him. Something else, too, that I wish more games would do is at any point, for any reason you want to, you can change your character. So if you want to just switch to a girl out of nowhere, or switch to a smaller guy or bigger guy, you can do that. Or, collect costume pieces, like if you want to be a superhero or a samurai, which I kind of keep going back and forth in the campaign right now. Even just the small stuff, like when you gain health in the game, there's a noise that it makes. It almost sounds like a retro video game, gaining health, and just little things they've done in it. If I had any complaints about the game, it is a little repetitive. You're kind of doing the same shit over and over again. And there's been a couple times where I'll save the game at weird times and almost think I have to restart this or do this over again, because I thought I broke the game because an objective wasn't popping, or issues. And I read online that I wasn't the only person, that if you save at a weird time or do weird shit, it'll break the game. But those are pretty minor for me as well, so I've really been enjoying it. And something else too, I think games, especially Ubisoft games, where they have a lot of collectibles, but very few reasons to collect the collectibles other than achievements. But there's a character in this game called Floyd, where to do his missions, you have to have a certain number of the collectibles. And you can buy maps and stuff that show you exactly where the collectibles is. So it's not too crazy to go around and collect this stuff, which is just fun. Which, I mean, ultimately that's what video games are for, is to be fun. It's not supposed to be aggravating. I think this week I had a little bit more pickups, but I haven't organized them yet. So, but those hopefully should slow down. Like I said, this podcast is supposed to be getting through the backlog, not acquiring an even bigger backlog. So, but this week I'll have a few pickups, and then maybe next week. But pickup was probably the biggest one, was from one of our friends. I bought a Halo console. It's boxed. I had the console, just not the box nor the controller. So I'm happy to get that. And then, of course, I got the Sacred Symbols PS Vita and PS4 version of their game. So hopefully get to play that soon and give you some more information on that. And so besides that, I think the only thing left, I'm trying to remember the formula of the show here, is news, which is pretty big this week. We've had some big stuff. News-wise, especially for Xbox, have been pretty slow up until this point. But probably the big first thing that popped out was, for Microsoft anyways, I think there's 4 stories here, 5 stories, and 3 of them are Xbox related. But the first one is, I guess almost all of these two are restructuring. It's almost like Xbox is trimming some fat right before this. That way that their stocks will drop when they trim this fat. But then I think when they announce the new consoles, the stocks will go up. So I think that's the purpose of them making all these announcements. Because, I mean, on the outside, it looks a little scary. You're like, man, is Microsoft having problems? But I think that they'll see a boost once these consoles are announced. So I think they are trimming the fat just so that when they're like, hey, this is what the consoles cost, they can get a little boost on those stocks. But the first trimming of the fat here is Microsoft shutting down Mixer and partnering with Facebook Gaming. And it's quoted as saying it's a move that will see Microsoft integrate xCloud into Facebook Gaming, which is kind of, I didn't expect that coming. I remember going out at PAX and knowing like Mixer had its section and Facebook Gaming had its section. It's weird to think back that at one point they'll team up, but I just don't think there is any chance of beating Twitch. Twitch is such a powerhouse now, especially with Amazon behind it. I don't even think Microsoft could take them down. I think they knew that as well. But that kind of puts down an interesting perspective on those bigger streamers. The only one I could think of is Ninja, but I know Mixer had poached 3 or 4 different Twitch streamers. But now they're free to stream wherever they want to. Their contracts are, I guess, canceled. So I guess they'll just go back to Twitch, I know Ninja had said some pretty crazy shit about Twitch when he left. But I'm sure they'll welcome back with open arms with a little, I told you so. So I just don't know. It's kind of crazy that Xbox or Microsoft killed something this quick. They usually let shit hang on the vine for a little too long, so it's surprising that they did that. Now, the next biggest news is something that was just announced, 8 o'clock this morning, is that Microsoft is shutting down all of their physical stores. Minus a few. I guess there's 4 of them. You got London, New York, Sydney, and Redmond. And Redmond, I believe, is where their headquarters is. So it seems like the stores they've left open have been almost stores, that are more advertisement than making a profit. Because I'm sure the rent is higher than what they make there. It's just, they want their name in those big cities. And it's probably cheaper than running an actual advertising campaign in Times Square or something like that, just to have your store there. One of the driving, I know I mention this a lot, but I love physical media. So this quote stuck out to me about, they said that software and hardware sales are going online, and that was the main driving point about closing their stores, was the fact that no one buys physical hardware or software anymore, and that a lot of stuff is just is going the way of the internet, or just purely downloading, which is sad for me because I'm the type of guy that likes to put shit on shelves and collect unnecessary packaging and stuff like that. But yeah, once again, that they did see a drop in stocks again, but I think they planned this to happen right before the consoles, just so they can announce the consoles in their July press conference, and they could see a boost back up. So I could even expect maybe some more trimming of the fat, just so that the stocks won't get hurt too much by these closings. They also said that they're not firing anybody. They're going to be given new positions at Microsoft, which on the surface it seems like a really good thing. But you hear sometimes these companies won't directly lay people off or fire people when they close a place. I know a few movie theater chains work this way. And that way they do not have to pay unemployment for these people. And it kind of helps save face, a little bit. But I don't expect a lot of these people to stick around. I'm not sure what they'd be needed for. Let's see. I mean, essentially these things were supposed to be Apple stores. But I know here in Columbus we have an Apple store and we have a Microsoft store. If you go to the Microsoft store, there might be 3 people. But the Apple store always seemed to be full of people and a huge commotion. And it's a much, much larger store. They had a lot more products to offer. And I think it was dead on arrival. It was actually pretty funny. This was our first YouTube video, was when the Microsoft store opened here in Columbus. And that was probably the busiest I've ever seen it. And up until that point, there might have been maybe 4 or 5 people I'd seen there. Sometimes there'd be more associates than customers. So it's not surprising that they shut down. It's just a little sad. And the location of the Microsoft store actually used to be the Sega arcade in the early 2000s. So it's almost like that place is tainted, or some evil spirits hanging out there. I would love to be able to get in the store and maybe get some some signs or something from the Microsoft store, because I'm sure all that shit's going in the trash. But it'd be cool to have a little piece of history from it. I know I still have my T-shirt and my bag from when the store opened. But it's just sad to see that, especially the main reason behind the fact that stuff's moving online and everyone's kind of going the digital route. And they weren't the cheapest ever. They were actually pretty expensive. It was almost cheaper to buy online. I never understood that process. It was like, this game's $60, but right now I could buy it on Amazon for $20. But it'd been fun for the new consoles to maybe go out to that Microsoft store, because the Microsoft store opened after the Xbox One had happened. So it'd been cool to see some sort of event they would have done for the new Xbox there. But that's history now, and I most likely will be getting my new Xbox in the mail versus, waiting out at a store, which is always a much better experience because you're waiting in line with people and it's exciting and you talk about it and it's just fun, versus opening a box that comes, that gets set on your doorstep. Let's see. The second piece of news here, it's about the pricing for the new Xbox. These are leaks, but they're pretty well-timed leaks, because it seems like anytime PlayStation announces something or has some good steam behind them, Microsoft has a, quote, leak. But essentially what it is, this is coming from a quote from an article I was reading. It's that Anaconda is the eternal Microsoft code name for the Xbox Series X, while Project Scarlet is the code name for their overarching plans for the entirety of the next console generation. So it looks like there's going to be a family of consoles. One is going to be half priced, and that code name for that one's Lockhart. So you have 2 Xboxes possibly at launch, one called Anaconda and one called Lockhart. I think back in December 2 that was confirmed by Xbox. So I'm kind of interested to see what the difference is. I'm guessing the Lockhart's going to be a much smaller console, and maybe even some streaming like you had with Stadia, because I know Xbox is pretty big with their cloud computing. So I know the specs are putting it somewhere like at 1080p and some slower frame rates, but I'm wondering if it'll be part of their cloud computing and it will keep up with the Project Anaconda, which is oddly enough sounds like a penis, very phallic sounding. So I don't know if you could stream off that thing and keep up, or the fact that it'll be slower. I know some of the developers, I think, which is how this got leaked. The developers mentioned they had given them hardware-wise a shittier version, and they were calling it Lockhart, and to see how well their games run on it. So I don't know if it includes streaming or if this is actual hardware and it'll just be the same games just at 1080p or a shittier frame rate. But at half price, I don't understand how PlayStation could even compete with that. $200, which would, people that don't have console, people that don't want all the consoles, or people that, you know, just want a game and want the best deal, like your casual gamers or your parents, they're going to see that $200 price tag on the new console versus, you know, $400 or $500. They'll definitely be picking that over the PlayStation. So if I'm sure PlayStation's pretty worried about that, because it doesn't matter, because if third parties going to everything, it doesn't matter what they're buying, because, you know, if they're only playing Fortnite, of course they're going to grab the thing that's half the price. I think we'll see more in the July event. I'm excited to see what happens in July and to see an actual price point, and be interesting to see how different Lockhart looks compared to the Anaconda or the Series X, Xbox Series X. I can't keep up with these names. Let's see. So I think pricing wise, we could see $200 for the smaller version and $400 for the actual console, which would be insane. I don't see PlayStation really competing with that too much. And if you look at the history of console releases, that launch price is usually a deciding factor in who wins that console war. RGT85's got a great video on discussing it. That's where I got most of my information, and several articles I recommend reading. They'll be much more knowledgeable than I am, and probably explain stuff a little bit a lot better than me. So, but it seems like it's going to be, they might even call it like the S model for they might bring back that S for Lockhart. You know, Xbox Series X, S. These names are getting ridiculous. But RGT85 brought up a good point that maybe the Xbox One Xbox One S, Jesus Christ, was a test run for this to see how the market does. Because he mentioned, which I think he's correct, that, you know, releasing that console was kind of dumb. The Xbox One was a dying console, and, you know, they just wanted to do it just to test and to test the waters. Which on their point, that I think is pretty smart. At the time, I was like, why would they do this? But I think he's correct. Actually, that's all the Microsoft news. So there's only four news. Unfortunately, 3 of the 4 is about physical media. Number 4, and last one here before I wrap up, is GameStop Q1 2020 earnings calls. I had not known some crazy shit was going down at GameStop till Fantavision, which used to do, I think originally watched him on Craigslist Game Finds back in the day. Did a couple videos on their new Q1 earnings call, and there's a great article on a website called Motley Fool, I think, but not a lot of people reporting on it. Essentially, the investors had promoted these two guys had promoted these two guys into the board. And initially, it was thought these guys were short-term investors, but they've been invested since 2011 and been waiting to be able to make actual change at GameStop. I don't know a lot about investing or finances, but I'll do my best here. And there's a lot more knowledgeable people out there if you want to get some more info on it. But their plan is rightfully named Restore GameStop, which I think is fantastic. Operation Restore GameStop. I try to break it down into points here. And I think all this stuff's kind of common sense. It's all stuff we've seen memes about or people make fun of GameStop for, which they're kind of asking for more trade value. So when you take a game into the store, they want to give you more money for it. And two, with talking to GameStop managers, it seems like there's going to be more focus on valued titles, like your Call of Duties or Mario, it's different stuff like that, versus buying everything, which I think will be really smart for them to do that. And then another focus too is them needing more used games. GameStop's entire model is based on used games. That's their highest profit margin. If they sell a new game, they're making maybe $5, but if they sell a used game, they're making $30-$40. Because I think even right now, it's in-store credit for like a $50 game is like $20, so they're making $30 off that versus the $5. And as there's more and more push to digital, which I think last September we saw the first time the new Borderlands that sold more digital than physical, which is insane. I mean, when I was a senior in high school, that was unheard of. That was ridiculous, and that doesn't even feel that long ago. But now we're here, and I think GameStop's kind of sitting around waiting to die. Is how it feels. And the next one, which I think is a great point for them, especially if you follow the GameStop manager Reddit. I think it's just GameStop on the Reddit, but it mainly seems to be employees for GameStop in the store level. They seem to punish people a lot if you're not doing what you're supposed to, but never rewarding. So these guys want to be able to reward the managers more, which I think is going to put a big drive behind them, selling more games for them or giving them a reason to come into work and to feel appreciated versus, them telling them they're going to be watching them on cameras and some Orwellian shit. The next point, they want to continue the gaming hub model, which I think one of our earlier episodes we talked about how GameStop was changing their model to more of a hangout scene. So they want to continue that. I think that's a great idea. It's time to chill out on the pop figures and all their weird-ass merchandise that they filled these tiny stores with. And something else, too. They want to just, generally speaking, I think this is kind of just goes over the whole aspect of it. They want to change GameStop's reputation. For some reason, I don't think it's very rightful, but GameStop has a really bad reputation. I've been shopping at, I started Software Etc., EB Games, in the late 90s to now. I was just in a GameStop yesterday. So what is that, 22 years maybe? Even before that, I was going in there, but out of my memory, 22 years of going to those stores. I went to GameStop before it was even known as GameStop. So I don't think they deserve the shit they get, especially because people bring in absolute trash in there and expect them to give them, full price. They're a business. They have to operate at some level. So I think it's a good idea to rebuild the reputation, but economically, I don't know how you would do that without, what are you going to do? Give everybody insane amount of money for their, bad games? In mom and pop video game stores seems to be doing decent, but that's because they operate at all level of every console. So I think GameStop needs to start accepting all retro games and to almost take on that model, because people with new games are going to just focus on digital. And ultimately, that's not, you can't survive as GameStop when you're focusing on new games solely, and 60% of the sales are digital versus, as 2012, you might have had 3 or 4 or 5% digital. So if they take on that more aspect, because even yesterday I was looking for Vita games and I had called a GameStop and he said something that retro I'd recommend. He gave me a mom and pop store. He said go there, and I felt really that console came out in 2011 and he called it retro. But I guess that's the point of getting old. That this stuff that when I was a senior came out that's now he called it retro. It made me feel really old. But then that was just literally GameStop telling me to go to what is a competitor to find something because they don't offer it. So I wish there would have been more focus on in their earnings call. I wish there would have been more focus on the retro, because if you truly want a hangout place, you're going to have that retro in there. So I hope there's more push for that, and they start taking trade-ins on all video game systems, not just 360 and up. Then I think the final thing they left it off of in their earnings call, which is probably the most awkward one because they're kind of calling each other out in this board, is the fact that executives are overpaid, which it kind of makes sense. They're closing stores and laying people off, and lowering the overall experience at GameStop. Meanwhile, these guys are making $1 million bonuses. So I get it. I know executives have really hard jobs, and I'm a capitalist, and I love capitalism, so I think they definitely deserve to be paid a good sum. But at the same time, bonuses are for when the company's doing well, or they're succeeding in different aspects. And as far as I can tell, GameStop's not exceeding. So I don't think they deserve bonuses or pay raises. And I think too, Fanta had mentioned they have a private jet for the executives to fly. But so you're firing people and your company's kind of sinking, and you guys are flying private jets. It's not a good sign. But yeah, so I think that's it news-wise and pickup-wise, and I think Casey's also releasing a video with this as well. So make sure you listen to both of them, and we might have also talked about some of the same stuff, but I'm sure Casey's was a lot smoother than mine. But yeah, just we have a Twitter, an email. We got a whole bunch of things you could find us at, with questions, comments, different things, or corrections. I'm sure there's probably some corrections in here for me. But yeah, so go follow us on that stuff, and just let us know if I fucked up somewhere along the lines. Bye.